So, good morning. My name is Linda Napoli, and today is a departure from the usual Sunday talks. But as you well know, poetry is always a part of our program. So, since March is Women's History Month, this will be an acknowledgement of the history of women in the world of poetry. So let's begin with a beautiful piece of music. And while you listen, reflect on the women who have had a positive impact on your life. So this is one of my favorite pieces of music. It really calms me down. That's what the whole purpose of this program is, by the way. So the first poem that will be read was written in the 12th century in China. This untitled poem was written by Li Xingshao, who is considered one of the greatest poets in Chinese history. What's interesting about her is that she wrote in what's known as the Qi form, which suggests that her poetry was sung rather than spoken. Linda Jo will read the poem for us.
Although this is untitled, it's assumed that she wrote this when she was about 16 or 17 years old. The fragrance of the pink lotus fails. The jade mats hint of autumn. Softly, I unfasten my silk cloak.
But in the oral tradition of wandering minstrels in those days, many ballads were sung, mostly in Scotland. I'm going to read one I came across years ago in the first poetry book I ever bought. I see this ballad as an early sign of women's liberation. The title is Get Up and Bar the Door. It fell about the Martinmas time, and a gay time it was then, when our good wife got puddings to make, and she boiled them in the pan. The wind so cold blew south and north, and blew into the floor. Quoth our good man to our good wife, go out and bar the door. My hand is in my hussey's cap, good man, as ye may see. It should nae be barred this 100 year, if it's to be barred by me. They made a paction tween them two, they made it firm and sure, that the first word whoe'er should speak should rise and bar the door. Then by there came two gentlemen at 12 o'clock at night, and they could neither see house nor hall, nor coal nor candlelight. Now whether is this a rich man's house, or whether is it a poor, but ne'er a word would any of them speak for barring of the door. So first they ate the white puddings, and then they ate the black. Though muckle, too much, thought the good wife to herself, yet ne'er a word she spak. Then said the one unto the other, Here, man, take ye my knife. Do ye cut off the old man's beard, and I'll kiss the good wife. But there's no water in the house, and what shall we do then? What ails ye? Use the pudding brew that boils in the pan. Oh, up, then started our good man, an angry man was he. Will ye kiss my wife before me even, and scald me with pudding brie? Then up and started our good wife, gave 3 skips on the floor. Good man, you've spoken the foremost word. Go out and bar the door. Okay. Now we'll do some time travel again to the 19th century, which I would describe as the beginning of the modern era of poetry written by women. For example, I'm sure you're familiar with names like Elizabeth Barrett Browning and Emily Dickinson, to name a couple. English poet Jane Euphemia Brown is less well known to us, but she lived a significant life, not just because of her poetry, but because she took part in the British women's suffrage movement. She died at the age of 87, 8 years before all women in England were given the right to vote. Here is a poem she wrote early in her life entitled The Rooks. It will be read by Pat Spencer.
The Rooks by Jane Ephemera Brown. The rooks are building on the trees. They build there every spring. Caw, caw is all they say, for none of them can sing. They're up before the break of day and up till late at night, for they must labor busily as long as it is light. And many a crooked stick they bring, and many a slender twig, and many a tuft of moss until their nests are round and big. Caw, caw, or oh, what a noise they make in rainy weather. Good children always speak by turns, but rooks all talk together.
Rooks, I don't know what this is, carnival build.
Thank you, Pat. The next poem you'll hear is entitled Songs for the People, and you'll understand why it was written when I tell you a little bit about the poet. Francis Watkins Harper was an African-American reformer, writer, and activist whose accomplishments for Black society were vast. Aside from being a poet, she was a hero. She lived from 1825 to 1911. Her poem will be read by Alicia Evans.
Let me make songs for the people, songs for the old and the young, songs to stir the battle cry whenever they are sung. Not for the clashing sabers, for carnage nor strife, but songs to thrill the hearts of men with abundant life. Let me make the songs for the weary, amid life's fever and fret, till hearts shall sing, hearts shall relax their tension, and careworn brows forget. Let me sing for little children before their footsteps stray, sweet anthems of love and duty to float over life's highway. I would sing for the poor and aged, with shadows dimming their sight, of the bright and restful mansions where there shall be no light. Our world, so worn and weary, needs music pure and strong to hush the jangle and discords of sorrow, pain, and strong. Music to soothe all its sorrow, till war and crime shall cease, and the hearts of men grow tender, girdle the world with peace.
Very modern sounding poem, isn't it? This time, we're going to travel to Arctic Canada to hear a poem by an Eskimo woman whose name was Uvarnek. She also lived in the late 19th century. There is a legend surrounding her life that says one night she was struck by a glowing ball of fire, probably a small meteorite, which entered her body, after which she became a shaman or prophet for her people. This poem comes from an oral culture and was not written down until around 1920. It will be read by Joan Beater.
The great sea stirs me. The great sea sets me adrift. It sways me like the weed on a river stone. The sky's height stirs me. The strong wind blows through my mind. It carries me with it. So I shake with joy.
The title of that was Moved. I forgot to include that. Now back to the continental United States. Dorothy Parker is remembered as a 20th century poet, but her life was much broader than that. She was also very successful at writing plays and fiction, as well as being known for her sharp-witted social commentary. She was a founding member of the Algonquin Round Table. Most people are familiar with that. It was a group of writers who met in the Algonquin Hotel in Manhattan for many years, actually. And this was in the early 1930s. And her outspokenness landed her on the Hollywood blacklist in the 1950s. And again, for those of you who may not be aware of that, it was a list of writers, producers, directors, actors, and actresses who had spoken out about McCarthy's committee in Congress about communism, if I'm not mistaken. He wanted to get rid of all the communists in our country that we had at the time. Anyway, her poem, Afternoon, will be read by Sue Pfeiffer.
When I am old and comforted and done with this desire, with memory to share my bed and peace to share my fire, I'll comb my hair in scallop bands beneath my laundered cap and watch my cool and fragile hands lie light upon my lap. And I will have a sprig gown with lace to kiss my throat. I'll draw my curtain to the town and hum a purring note. And I'll forget the way of tears and rock and stir my tea. But oh, I wish those blessed years were further than they be.
So I think this is a very appropriate poem for most of us in the room. Her poetry generally wasn't like that, so it's really an interesting, she must have had a moment of reflection toward the end of her life that I think stimulated her to write that poem. Nikki Giovanni, who passed away last December, I'm sure you all know that, began writing poetry in the 1960s as a response to the Black Power and Black arts movements. Through her work, she has left a tremendous legacy to all of us. She wrote the poem Black History Month in 2002. It will be read by Alicia Evans. And I just want to make one note. Black History Month was begun by Gerald Ford, President Gerald Ford, in 1976, if I'm not mistaken. So, Alicia?
If Black History Month is not viable, then wind does not carry the seeds and drop them on fertile ground. Rain does not dampen the land and encourage the seeds to root. Sun does not warm the earth and kiss the seedlings and tell them plain, You are as good as anybody else. You've got a place here too.
Very powerful. The one thing I like about poetry is you can have poems of imagery, like the Rooks, for example. You can have poems that are sending a message, like the one that Alicia just read. There are poems in every category that you can imagine. So I'm sure a lot of people like to read poetry or like to listen to poetry, but if you don't or haven't, it's a great way to go when you want to calm yourself down and feel good about life in general. The final poem is by Rita Dove. She is a contemporary poet who has a remarkable history in the world of poetry. She was born in 1952. She won the Pulitzer Prize for Poetry in 1987 at the age of 35, and was the first Black poet laureate of the United States and the state of Virginia as well. This poem will be read by Judy Rosemarin.
For Sophie, who'll be in first grade in the year 2000. No bright toy this world we've left you. Even the wrapping is torn, the ribbons grease-flecked and askew. Still, it's all we have. Wait a moment before you pick it up. Study its scratches and how it shines in places. Now, love what you touch, and you will touch wisely. May the world in your hands brighten with use. May you sleep in sweet breath and rise always in wonder to mountain and forest, green gaze and silk cheek. Dear Sophie, littlest phoenix.
So what message could you give your child better than that, right? Okay, so thank you to all the women who have read these wonderful poems. I hope you, the listeners, will look up some of the names you heard today. They're in the program. But there's more. We have two more poems that are each tributes to women who made a difference in the speakers' lives. So first I will call upon Lorraine Agostino, who wrote this poem for her mother, who died recently, as you heard. Lorraine?
So my mother had congestive heart failure, and it was difficult for her to breathe at the end. So we would take turns holding her and breathing with her. And I was inspired to write this as I watched my daughter hold my mother. Rest your head upon my shoulder. Let me hold your hand in mine. Point me in the right direction, lending comfort and a sign. That I may hold in my heart your abiding love to me, always guiding, leading, nurturing, with grace, strength, humility. As we breathe in silent rhythm, I think of all those years gone by so quickly, yet always filled, sharing joy and beauty and tears. You have given much to others each and every day. As you rest, we will carry on with the kindness that was your way. Your hands at rest, your breath is still, your soul ready to take flight. And yet your love has planted seeds in the quiet of the night. Those seeds will flourish in the rich soil of life, watered by the memories we hold. You have touched us all in so many ways, with gifts more valuable than gold. Rest your head upon my shoulder as you once did for me, and I will keep your love within my heart for all eternity.
Sounds like a classic, right? Beautiful. Okay, so the second one that is going to be read today, that wasn't expected or planned, but I'm really happy that it's going to be done, is for Lois Walker, or by Lois Walker, who was a member of our society, and she passed away not long ago. And this one will be presented by Elke Bluth and Ginger Handler and Arthur. Are you involved in this? Okay. So, where are they? Oh, there they are. Oh, this will take a minute.
Well, before I start, there are many of you here who saw me yesterday get very emotional. So, Lois Walker was, my voice rises several pitches. She was one of my best friends for many, many years. And when I look at her picture, it makes me miss her. Okay, I wrote something for her. And she was a great poet. She was an amazing poet. She won many awards for her poetry. Anyway, this is just in her honor. Ode to a friend, a poet, a painter, a thinker, a sculptor, a teacher, a lover of Snoopy and Woodstock. Kind, strong, thoughtful, mischievous as a child, animal lover, donor to World Wildlife Fund. I fought for a seat next to you in painting class. I won. We had lunch together after class. We spoke every night. You had your poetry group, I in my studio. Sleep tight, don't let the bedbugs bite. You loved your classical music, and you knew the names of each composer. You loved the opera and traveling around the world. When I joined Pleiades, a gallery in Manhattan, it was not too long before you joined. We exhibited our work there, eating lunch at diners throughout Long Island. You liked French toast and had no interest in cooking, not your forte. When I joined the Ethical Society, it was not too much later that you joined. It was enjoyment for you. You lived alone after Janice died. You learned to use Uber when you gave up driving. Used Peapod for groceries, still sharp as a tack. Ordering art supplies from Michael's. When it became time to move into a senior residence, life narrowed. But you always found something to inspire you. You were a voracious reader, and just looking at the children next door in the playground made you happy. You loved life. Life loved you, my friend. I love you. Sorry.
I wanted to read a poem that Lois had written. This is from a book of hers called Pandora's Box Collected Poems. And many of you here remember Lois, but some of you do not, because for the last number of years she was at a nursing facility and wasn't able to attend, although she did continue to attend regularly for on the Friday morning Zoom colloquy. So here's a poem of hers. It's called My World. My world is people. People talk to me and smile when I do. Children especially laugh with me, at me. I am glad they can. The older world is hard enough for me to understand. My world is people, and the words aloud or side by side on a page. Children close the door after they learn more. It's too bad they must. An opaque shell is enough almost for us to crawl in. My world is people, and the words, and love, here tumbled, bits and pieces. Children do come near, sliding around fear. I am glad they can come out once in a while for us to appear close assembled.
I met Lois Walker casually first at the regular Sunday meetings years ago. About 5 years ago, we realized we both lived in Amityville, and I started to visit her occasionally. She would show me her artwork, told me stories of her teaching career, her travels with her housemate Janet, who was also a teacher, about her brief marriages, 2 of them. I soon realized how much we had in common. We both loved classical music. When I mentioned once, I just listened to Casals on the way here, she said, "Oh, I heard him in Europe on my travels." Since my younger daughter is an artist and my older daughter is a writer, my son is a teacher, our common interests drew us to each other, and my visits became more frequent. When I first met her, I would find her playing with a piece of wood, a string of wire, a hammer and nails on the top of a stepladder, creating something. She was always creating something. Housekeeping was not her forte. In fact, she often mentioned to me how overrated house cleaning was. There were canvases throughout her house, art supplies, half-finished projects, pieces of material that she might use for another project later on. She loved to keep her house at least 90 degrees, summer or winter. It took me months to dare to say to her, "Lois, we gotta air out this place." What was so admirable about her was that she never complained about her physical or psychological aches and pains. She was always creating. "I'm having fun," she would say. Her artwork were her children, she once told me. "I so enjoy doing my art." When I visited one of her art shows, I noticed all her artworks were marked at $10,000. And I asked Ginger, her friend, she's never going to sell anything at these prices. And Ginger answered, she doesn't want to sell it. I discovered as time went by that she had 3 storage units full of artwork, a lifetime of pleasure while creating art. Later, when I would rotate paintings in her room at the assisted living in Glen Cove, she would exclaim, "Oh, I had so much fun painting this." Because she was also a 5th grade teacher, her focus was always on writing. She had notebooks full of ideas and techniques about writing that she shared with my children, who were all teachers. Her book of poems, Pandora's Box, collected poems by Lois Walker, represents another one of her creative achievements. She writes then in the notes to the readers, "My intention has been simple. I wanted to share where I was when I started to write poems and follow the changes time has brought about in my poems and in me. I've been surprised that I still see the world in much the same way." Many of her writings had been published in anthologies and literary magazines such as Writer's Notes and Quotes, Hartford Current, American Poets, and the list goes on and on, a whole page of publications. But I wanted to take a moment to tell you about how my personal relationship with Lois evolved. It so happens her name is Lois Victoria, Luise Victoria in German. My mother's name was Victoria Luise. I don't put much credence in coincidences, but over the past years, we became very close and eventually became best friends. That meant I was becoming her advocate / watchdog at the nursing home, bringing her chocolates, bottled water, personal items, anything she needed. I did her mail, emptied her house, brought her books, ordered magazines. But when I finished taking care of, quote, business, she would always say, "Let's chat." We would read the same books and have lively discussions. I remember when we both got through Thackeray's Vanity Fair, a book this thick. At the end, she commented, "I can't stand either of these characters." I had to agree. The 3-volume of Eleanor Roosevelt's biography was one of her favorites, mine too. We talked politics. With Trump's re-election, she mourned the end of civilization. I would recap our weekly discussion topics from Ethical, and she always had very poignant opinions. And we both loved classical music. So I bought a CD player and brought in my favorite music. On December 11, she died peacefully in her sleep. I was with her the night before. She held my hands.
Thank you, Elke. That was a beautiful tribute. Okay, our closing song. There will be some announcements, I think, after this, but I want to round out the program. As you can see from the program is the humming chorus from Madama Butterfly by Puccini. You can't sing along with this one, but if you know it, you can hum along softly.